and then looking around me at the way Christianity is presented to me, over here, from all these different places you're encountering it, and seeing like, well, that's just the way it is for everybody, that we just have all of these scattered parts, and we don't know how they fit together. We don't know what to do with them. We don't know how these things line up, are, cohesive in any meaningful way. So it's like, and to me, like leading me to the conclusion, like, then we must just not actually know Christ, because Christ is the thing that draws everything and unites them in himself.
Welcome to The Sacred Life. I'm your host, Aaron Beachy, coming to you from Kokomo, Indiana again, and today we are going to discuss a little bit why we visited an Orthodox church. Again, today we have John Baylor with us, David Baylor with us as well. I believe they're still brothers.
I'm not sure.
We're glad you're joining us again today. And John, again, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and get us started today. Why did we visit the Orthodox Church?
Well, actually, what I want to start off with is a reason why we didn't visit, because here we are making this YouTube channel. We don't do a whole lot of things where the three of us are together when we're not doing this. And
we don't really like each other.
No, not really.
Well, and you see other videos of people like visiting a Greek Orthodox church, and especially since we put ours up and I've watched it over and over and tried to respond to a lot of different comments and things like that, then YouTube is saying, oh, he must really love this stuff. So I get a lot of that in my feed, the same type of video here. And I just wanted to start off by clearing the air and saying we didn't have any kind of instrumental motive, meaning we weren't doing that. We weren't going to the place so that we could turn around and make a YouTube video out of it. And I think the fact that video is, over 10,000, over 11,000 views, which is way more than anything else on our channel has done, then it might seem like, oh, we finally found the thing to get viewers. But when we walked in there, I said to Dave, hey, take some pictures while we're here, because my daughter wanted to see some pictures. I wasn't thinking, take some pictures because we're going to make a video and we need some thumbnail pictures or anything like that. My daughter wasn't able to come, and she was very eager to. I recorded a little bit of the service just so she could hear the singing that was going on during that. But certainly the reason that we went wasn't so that we could gain an audience from it or something like that.
Right. Yeah. And lo and behold, those pictures ended up as thumbnails, like you said. But David, what are your thoughts on that? Like, it's kind of been like John said, an organic thing that happened. We had all of a sudden this video starting to get views and go viral, and like I'm at work and David's texting me, we're up over 1,000 views. I'm like, wait, what? How and why? And so just interesting, and not something that I don't think any of us really expected to happen.
Yeah, I think we expected like a little more viewership than we normally get, just from, I guess, branching out into...
as far as viewership, though, I just want to keep this from being too much of a hey, look at us making our YouTube videos kind of thing.
Right.
But like seeing the kind of response for me was a very positive experience, because it gives me this sense of like, okay, we're doing something important now, and that means we've got to make sure that we're doing it right.
Yeah.
So I feel like I've been able to take a seriousness to this task that I didn't exactly have before.
Yeah, so I guess taking that and going, to me answering the question is, I don't know that I don't know, like this, there's kind of this sense of a coming together of an understanding of what we're doing, but it's not like we're changing what we're doing because of the success of that video. I'd say that's related to the reason why we went to begin with, which is just this desire to engage with that tradition, with the Orthodox tradition, to, I guess, like reach out and put our hands on the good in that tradition, and maybe draw ourselves and our people, our churches, towards what is there. And like that's not something that you're going to get just by watching YouTube videos or reading books. Like it's something that has to actually be experienced. It's something you have to actually participate in. And so I can only speak for me personally. For me personally, why I wanted to go was to participate in those things and to witness, the parishioners in that church participating in the life of the church, and see there's the theoretical side that people present when talking about it, but here's what it is actually on the ground.
Yeah. So we drove just a little over an hour to get to the church that we went to, and there's another one that we visited in Battleground. Oh, there actually is one in Kokomo. I was going to say, you could have just driven down the road and gone to the Catholic Church or gone to a Presbyterian church or lots of Baptist churches in Kokomo to choose from. There are a lot of or Quakers. I mean, I'd mentioned that one just because we've got Quakers nearby, and I don't know that any of us have ever been in a Quaker service.
Yeah, right.
I've been in most of those others that I rattled off there, but this was an Orthodox service. So why was it that you felt like reaching out and participating and joining with that tradition, but you didn't have that thought with those other churches? So.
Yeah, I guess to answer that question, we're going to drop some threads here that we're going to pick up then in subsequent videos. So we'll make some points here and then kind of lay them down for now, not really expound on them further.
Yeah, well, this is more the personal side of it.
Yeah, but we will also relate. So I will make some points there. One is just a connection, there is a real strong connection in that tradition that you don't find, in any of these other things that you mentioned, to something very ancient. I guess for me, I've always had a particular, I don't really want to say fascination because that makes it sound, I don't know, kind of trivial, but
kind of touristy.
I've always had a particular draw towards, I guess you would say, the ancient world and an ancient way of life, ancient way of thinking, in contrast to our modern way. And I would be one that's just there's something wrong with our modern world. I'm not sure what it is. And so looking back to find okay, things obviously went off the rails, not only in the church, but just in the world in general. It's what actually went off the rails and when, and what's that mean? And to me, it's you find something in the Orthodox tradition that has retained something that doesn't belong in the modern world. It doesn't belong to the modern world, I should say. It's not that it doesn't belong in the modern, it doesn't belong to the modern world.
So to real quickly to just add to what you just said, you talking about having an interest in the ancient things, or maybe being more inclined to gravitate towards that rather than modern ways of thinking. We've talked before on our channel about how we've, gotten into reading the church fathers. And, we've had you go back and look through our episode. We have some episodes of ancient insights and things like that you can listen to. But what's interesting is that we have gotten into reading those and studying what those guys said and what they have to say. And what happened, at least what has happened for me, is when you get into reading those things and listening to what those guys had to say, you start to wonder, where does how we practice today in my church connect in any way to what those guys were saying? And for me, that's kind of one of the reasons why I had an interest in visiting the Orthodox Church, is because it seems there is still quite a good connection there to what those guys taught.
A connection to the fathers, a respect for the fathers.
Yes.
Seeing the importance of it. And this kind of relates to what you're saying. And why I personally have developed an interest in the Orthodox Church. Well, for one thing, I would say, like, you know, we need to give some credit to that, to figures like Jordan Peterson, Jonathan Peugeot. But I know for me personally, my knowledge and interest in these things isn't entirely because of you know, those people like that I would have had some interest before then. And so it was kind of exciting to me to encounter these people talking about, it's like, hey, this is something that I've come across in trying to like figure out what's going on in the church, and like something that doesn't fit in like the story that we try to put together of Christianity, something that tells us some of our narratives are not right.
Right.
And now here, like, there's actually people connected to it. There's actually, you know, we can engage with it. And it's not like, here's this thing that's going on over in Greece and Russia and all these places that we have no access to.
Yeah.
It's like all of a sudden, bam, there's access to it.
Yeah.
So it's like there's this, suddenly this coming together of East and West that there hasn't been before. I had another thing that I was going to say, but I forgot what it was. So
Well, I
we
had
can
another,
move on.
I had another thought that I'll just add to that, is that there are some specific writers, there are some specific individuals that actually got me interested in Orthodoxy. Now, you started talking about Orthodoxy long before I was interested in it. David did, and
You probably thought I was
And wouldn't
like,
stop talking about it.
he wouldn't stop talking about it, and I was like, oh, well, I don't know, I suppose. I mean, I don't know, really. And what really got me to really take a look and pay attention was the writings of Maximus the Confessor, The Ascetic Life. That's what it's called, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, relates, so I'm sorry I'm interrupting, but it'll come right back to Maximus. But in our Ancient Insights that you've referenced, we were reading Pilgrim Marpak, who's an early Reformation era Anabaptist, and we're reading the Theologia Germanica, which is a medieval mystical work that was influential on a lot of reformers, not just within the Anabaptist tradition, but certainly among Anabaptist reformers. And so we're reading those two works, so the Reformation era Anabaptist, the pre-Reformation era, that's an influence on the Anabaptists, and then we were reading Maximus the Confessor. So it was kind of interesting to me, after the thing that everybody gravitated toward in our video was on our channel, was that one video that we did about Mennonites visiting an Orthodox church. And we'll kind of continue to play up the Orthodox Anabaptist dialogue or connection as we go. But it was interesting to me that was actually there from the very beginning. We have these foundational Anabaptist works and this foundational Orthodox work.
Yeah, and then also this medieval bridge between them.
Mm-hmm.
And which that does remind me of the other thing I was going to say, which is that I've come to learn that this is, I guess you would say, very Orthodox of me. But one thing that drew me to some of the conclusions I have is just not trusting myself to come up, like to have the right answers, the right conclusions on things. Like I don't know, like sometimes out of a place of frustration is just like, why can't I figure this out? And these other people seem to be figuring things out. Or why can't I, have the revelation and the insights that I asked for in prayer? And just coming to the conclusion over time with that, it's like, well, there's an error in thinking there. That's actually very prideful in thinking that this all lies within me. Mm-hmm. And that this, even this relationship and this, I guess you would say, inspiration of the Holy Spirit is strictly a one-on-one personal thing. And that kind of, that's kind of what leads me to the Church Fathers, is just like, I don't really know how to read the Bible, and I think I've said this before on videos. Like, I don't know how to read the Bible. I don't know how to interpret it. Like, every time I pick up, the Old Testament especially, but like it's also true of the Gospels, and especially like Revelation, pick these things up and start reading it. It's just like, sometimes you just come away from it more confused than, I don't know, blessed or clarified or whatever you might say. It's just like, if we're honest, we realize like I don't have the whole picture here. Like there's all these pieces and all these parts that I don't know what to do with. And then looking around me at the way Christianity is presented to me, over here, from all these different places you're encountering it, and seeing like, well, that's just the way it is for everybody, that we just have all of these scattered parts, and we don't know how they fit together. We don't know what to do with them. We don't know how these things line up, are, cohesive in any meaningful way. So it's like, and to me, like leading me to the conclusion, like, then we must just not actually know Christ, because Christ is the thing that draws everything and unites them in himself. Like, I don't want to say that too harshly, but this is just, I'm just illustrating my way of thinking.
Yeah.
Like, and that's what leads me, I want to look at these, at the history of the church, with the understanding that this is how the Bible presents that the Holy Spirit operates, is through history and through his church.
Yeah.
And like I said, I've come to learn like that's rather Orthodox way of thinking, not a very Protestant way of thinking. But it's just, just being frustrated with the state
separation from history is coming up as a consistent theme, and when we were talking about our responses to visiting the Orthodox Church, and that was a kind of significant theme in that video as well, that there's a problem when your history only goes to the Reformation and has nothing but condemnation to cast on the whole Christian world that came before then. Something's wrong.
Yeah. Well, I think I've mentioned this in videos before too, but it's worth mentioning again, that also, like, before I discovered the Church Fathers, I first, went to my own tradition and to the Anabaptists. It's like, I don't even know what's going on in my own tradition, because it seems like in a lot of ways, things have been unraveling for a while. And like trying to figure out like what's going on. Is there some way to wind this all back up, like bring it all back together? But surely there has to be, because like the Bible seems to suggest that there is. And so going back to the Anabaptists and then just like finding these guys have a very different way of looking at Christianity, have a very different way of looking at the tradition of the church, and at the scriptures, than what their descendants think was passed down to them. So it's like there's this way in which we've lost our own tradition, and we don't even realize it.
Right.
And then through the course of that, discovering through them the church fathers, because they're always pointing at these figures and saying like, look, here is where we go to settle the disputes that are going on right now.
You're talking about the Anabaptists?
Yeah, the 16th century
Yeah.
Anabaptists. It's like they're pointing at the fathers and saying, like, stop trying to figure this out. Like, to the Protestants, they're saying, you guys are just making things up. I mean, that's my paraphrase. Like, you guys are just making things up because you don't understand what you're reading, and you're being overthrown by your own pride. And I would just throw this bone out to anybody listening who's Orthodox, that they make arguments that are very, very similar to the arguments Gregory Palamas makes against medieval scholasticism. So like they're rejecting this Protestant project on very similar grounds.
Yeah.
And they're pointing towards like a sort of mysticism, as opposed to this rationalism.
Well, you talked about being interested in Orthodoxy for a long time before Peterson and Pajot, and I remember you saying, I can't remember what your criticism was, but you had something critical that you were saying about the Orthodox Church, and this is how I'm really to blame for a lot of this. I was just trying to urge David, be careful with your criticisms, because there are a lot of things that they have really right in their tradition. And I think that probably I mentioned the idea of theosis, which is not the main point that I'm going to make right now, but theosis would be the process of becoming God or becoming like God. But I really like that articulation, because in the Orthodox tradition, this is like the purpose of your life. The purpose of your life is to be transformed into the likeness of Christ. And other traditions will have that as a belief that, yes, sure, we become like Christ as we grow and mature.
Yeah, but it's like an accident.
Right. But in the Orthodox idea of theosis, like,
That's what it's all
this
about.
is the vision, right?
Yeah. And it's worth interjecting there, like, it's also the vision of Anabaptism. And that ties it into, like, with this medieval German mystical tradition. That,
Right, yeah.
That is like this sort of lay piety of the late Middle Ages in the German Empire is focused on this. It's like, we're tired of this rationalism and this clericalism as it has worked out especially in the Holy Roman Empire at that point. Like, we're tired of this, and we think instead that salvation is worked out through hardship and suffering with the aim of becoming like God. So, like you mentioned the Theologia Germanica, like there is a passage in the Theologia Germanica that pretty directly expounds the doctrine of theosis.
Yeah. And then the other thing, I would have mentioned theosis, and then I would have also mentioned mystery, and the Orthodox approach to I'll just say dogma versus mystery, as something that I felt was very much right. And then I think you can also say that that's also going to be represented in the early Anabaptists.
Yeah, and I was going to say, like, that would be another thing that would, like, very much appeal to my Anabaptist sensibilities. Because, like, Anabaptism historically is not a theological or a doctrine-oriented tradition. Rather, it's something oriented on practice, on ethics.
And I think some of your concerns with Anabaptists losing their identity have to do with adopting a Protestant way of looking at things. And so, like, if your hypothesis, if that hypothesis is true, that Anabaptists are drawing too much from the Protestant world and it's changing their perspective on things, and it's changing their sense of who they are and their identity and their message to the world and all of this, then you're left with the question of, okay, where are we supposed to go to move out? Like, if this is the influence that we feel like we've gotten too much of, then how can we step outside of that in order to see anything? Like,
and that's a very uncomfortable question, to put it frankly. Because
well, I hope there are Protestants that are watching.
Well,
I mean, not to criticize. I mean, I'm just saying, but I still want I mean, I want to use the word communion, but I don't want that to be taken. That could mean a lot of different things, but I still want a type of communion with any any Christian that's tuning into what we're doing here.
But I think what you're saying is directly being said towards us as Anabaptists. Like,
and that I'm not trying to throw Protestant friends under the bus as I say that. That's what I mean. But
that's a good point.
But we've lost who we are and where we were coming from and what we were trying to say. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, and I mean, to be fair, David has accused me of being a Protestant many times. But no, I want to go back to something David said earlier about you made the statement, we don't know Christ, and then you kind of halfway apologized. But I want to take that statement and like unpack what you were actually saying. Like, that's not necessarily an accusatory statement necessarily. I mean, it can be, and it is, but on one hand, it's just a review of the results that are being produced, the fruit that's being produced.
Yeah, I think that's a good clarification.
And that's a pretty easy conclusion to come to when you start looking at the results the church in the West is producing, the culture that we have. We are not the envy of the world, we're the pain of the world, basically.
Yeah.
And I heard, forget which podcast I was listening to, but somebody asked the question, it might have been the Lord of the Spirits podcast, but one of their listeners asked the question, why can't we call the Orthodox Church in the United States the American Orthodox Church? Like we have the Russian Orthodox Church, we have the Greek Orthodox Church. And his response was, with where our culture is, we have no business calling any church in this country an American church. He said the American culture has to be saved.
Right.
And that goes for all of us.
Yeah, and part of that relates to the original statement I made on us not knowing Christ. I'm not talking about like head knowledge
Right.
of Christ. I'm talking about as it works out on the ground.
Right.
And that's actually a very good example of it, because the way in which America is not saved is the sense in which it is just fractured and scattered and disjointed. Like I'm just all these synonyms I'm coming up with to
It's almost
the brokenness,
in a sense, the Wild
the
West of
disunity.
Christianity.
And like, yeah, drawing it back to this idea that Christ is unity, like not uniformity, but like true unity. Christ does bring all things together in himself. And so like what I'm saying when we don't know Christ is like not like some theological argument. It's just pointing at this fact that,
But you could say, as a bride knows her husband.
yes, that's a good way to put it. Like we're not engaging in the life of Christ. We might be engaging in the doctrines of Christ, but that's a different matter altogether.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of always baffles me a little bit when people talk about how great the West is and how great America is, and like we've lost some of that greatness and we're in a strange place now. If we were as great as what we say we are, then why did we get here?
Yeah.
Wouldn't true greatness have prevented us from falling apart?
Yeah. And you can't really disagree with that. I mean, it's like, well, that's an awful harsh way of putting it, but it's like, it's true.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't really deny
Well, it's
that.
like that. To me, to my way of thinking, that says that in our pursuit of greatness, we were pursuing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And that's why it's falling apart. When you pursue the wrong thing, you fall apart.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I mentioned the idea that, that priest mentioned that you can't call the Orthodox Church in America the American Orthodox Church until it's actually worthy of being called or having its own tradition. The same goes for us as Anabaptists. I don't necessarily know that we've ever actually had American Anabaptists. Like we talk about Swiss Anabaptists, we talk about Dutch Anabaptists or whatever. I don't know if we can lay claim to that really. Like, because...
Well, so Aaron and I visited the same church that the three of us visited. We visited again on Holy Saturday, and afterwards we had the opportunity to talk with the priest a little bit. And he started to ask a question.
Father Anthony,
Yeah,
is who you're
Father
talking
Anthony. He started to ask a question about, like, are you guys experiencing people coming into your churches? And it's like, I was kind of embarrassed to be asked that question, to be
Yeah.
honest, because no, we're not. But the answer, like the reason is a lot of what Aaron just said, that we're so much of an ethnic identity.
well, it hasn't been that long ago. I mean, even 5 years ago, then you would say the same thing about the Orthodox
Yeah.
Church, that there's so much of an ethnic identity, no new people are going to come in there.
Yeah, right.
And things have drastically changed for them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my hope, this is part of the why did we visit an Orthodox church, or what are we hoping to get out of it? But part of what I'm hoping to get out of it is that our tradition can experience the same thing, because
Yeah.
I think we do have similar things to offer, not the same things. I don't want to equate the two traditions.
I have.
But in like, if we could like stand on our own 2 feet and be who we are, then we would have something to offer the modern world that the modern world is very, very hungry for.
Right.
And I want to look
Yeah.
to the Orthodox. We'll dig into this discussion more later. But I want to look to the Orthodox as an example of these are people who not only have they figured out that they have what the modern world needs, but they're sharing it with the modern world.
And like they've learned along the way that they've got to come to terms with the fact that offering that to the modern world might mean, I don't know quite how I would say, coming out of your shell a little bit.
Yeah.
So like for me, what you're just saying, and I have often phrased as, we as Anabaptist people have a lot to offer the world as it stands right now, but we can't offer it, and we're not offering it, and we need to get our act together first.
Mm-hmm.
Like we sort of have, I mean, this is kind of similar to the statement Aaron shared a minute ago, that we've got a lot of things that we need to come to terms with. We've kind of got no business trying to offer things to America or to the world in general right now as we are, until, we get our own house in order first. I think is a good way to put it.
Yeah, but those two things, those are like brother and sister.
Yeah,
to one
right.
another.
Part
Part of the way that you get your own act together is by doing good for other people.
It's true.
And I mean,
true.
it's true that you can't neglect, you will say self-improvement or whatever. You can't neglect self-improvement in order to help other people, because that is a flaw that some people have. We're so focused on other people and our own self, we're falling apart, and we're just are helping each other as a way of hiding from it. So like, that's not healthy either, but like hiding in a room and working on yourself also is really missing the picture.
Yeah, maybe the way you could put what David said is,
I think he put it the way it is.
well, he did. Another way to put it would be that God needs to deal with us as the Anabaptist movement and church. There needs to be things that there are things that have to be dealt with.
Yeah, and I meant that specifically, like being so outwardly focused at the expense of introspection, and honesty, and humility. So like the problem, so I'll just come right out and say this: the biggest problem that we have in our tradition is pride, that we think we're right, and you shouldn't, push the line. This is what we agreed on, so this is what we are, this is what we're doing. And that makes us useless. It ultimately puts us in a position where our churches exist to serve us, like to make us, I don't know how you would say it, comfortable.
Well, exalted, I mean, is what you're describing. Like, it makes us right.
Yeah, right. That'd be a good way to put it. And I don't want to say that it's necessarily the people themselves that are prideful. So like, I'm not accusing any Anabaptist people I know of as being proud, but it's like the thing that they're serving is very proud, if that makes sense. Hopefully that.
I think that's a fair way to put it. Like, I think in many ways, a lot of us as Anabaptists feel in some ways encapsulated into that thing that we are serving, as that prideful thing that we are serving.
Right. So for me as an Anabaptist person, why is it that I wanted to visit the Orthodox Church? It's not like as some kind of like tourism. A lot of people will visit churches as some kind of like spiritual tourism, or it's not like shopping around.
Let's go observe this spectacle over here.
Yeah, right. Which to an outsider, it is a spectacle.
Yeah, it is. No doubt.
That's not necessarily a bad thing either. Where was I going with that?
You said as an Anabaptist person, it's not some sort of tourism.
Yes, it's like to the points being made that like, okay, we need some answers to what's going on in our churches and what's going on in our culture. We need some answers. For the past 100 years, 150 years, we've been looking to all the wrong places. And maybe the answer is we need to, I guess, recapture the spirit of our ancestors who were like, let's forget this Western project of rational doctrine and theology, and let's instead
pray.
Well, yeah, let's instead pray, but let's instead have this, I mean, mysticism is the right word, but I'm trying to phrase this in a way that makes sense to people who don't understand what I mean when I say mysticism, because that word gets wrapped up with all kinds of other things in the modern world that have nothing to do with Christian mysticism. But like what I mean is like this, experience-focused sense of Christianity, like this sense of Christianity as being something that's lived and worked out, and the relationship with God as something that's very real, very present, like not something that's
experience, not like a feeling, but like as a mode of being.
See, and that is something that that is especially one of the things that I do appreciate that the Orthodox do in their way of doing their service, or in their liturgy is, and I mentioned this to you the other day, David, is that the gospel, they sing the gospel. Like when the priest reads it, he kind of sings it. When they say a lot of their prayers, they sing them, they don't just read them. There is a lot of reading, but there's also a lot of singing that happens. And there is something that happens when you, for instance, express the gospel in song rather than just reading it, that you can't quantify.
You engage in it more thoroughly.
Right. And you can't explain how you engage in it more thoroughly.
In a sense, when you say more thoroughly, just to clarify, it's not that you understand, like you're able to bear more of your reason onto the thing.
Right.
More thoroughly means you're engaging in it with that part of yourself that isn't rational.
Yeah, right. And that's kind of what I meant. I think you knew that.
Yeah.
That, like, if you just stand there, okay, so if what I'm doing is I stand up and I read a Bible passage and then I talk about it, I'm engaging my rational faculties, and that's it, pretty much. There might be a certain degree to which I'm engaging my emotional faculties also, but still, like, there's so much more to the human person than reason and emotion.
Yeah, and not just more, but reason does not know love. There's, I mean, to the rational part of the brain.
Well, reason also doesn't know itself.
Love and cherishing and valuing, that just doesn't exist. That comes from the irrational part of your mind.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I feel like I'm a big champion of irrationality, but that's not to say anything bad against rationality.
Yeah.
It's just to say that irrationality, that's where love is, and that's where meaning in life comes from.
Yeah, it's like reason wants to know everything, but by its nature can't truly know anything.
Yeah.
We'll probably wrap this up before too long, but Aaron, I also want to just ask you, I suspect there's probably something that we haven't touched on here in terms of your motives for why did you want to go visit the church?
I just assume because it's a maiden.
Well, I think one of the things that, and I think I mentioned this to you guys in our little group chat that we have, one of the question is obviously asked, why visit the Orthodox Church, or why Orthodoxy, or anything like that. And one of the things that I want to see is to see our people, the Anabaptist people, return to the Christianity of the church fathers, of the apostles, most importantly. And I think that it's fair to say, and again, it's not easy. It's not easy to say this in some ways. It's not easy to accept this for us as Anabaptists because we have a very proud tradition. But I think it's fair to say that we have drifted very far from the apostolic tradition.
We've drifted very far from our own tradition.
Right. Which you could say is a branch of the apostolic tradition.
Well, it's an attempt to recapture, is how I would say it.
Yeah.
It's an attempt to recapture the apostolic tradition.
Right. And that was one of my reasons, quite honestly, for visiting, is being able to learn, the Orthodox Church claims and seems to have a very strong connection with the apostles. And I think it's worth learning from. I think there's a lot we can learn from them.
Yeah, and I want to say to that point just a little bit. I guess I'm just anticipating where some people's minds are going to go there. Is we might look at them and point, well, here they're doing this or they're doing this, and we don't believe that that's what the apostles taught. And what I kind of say to that is, that's not the point. The point is approaching things with humility and asking, what am I doing wrong? What are we doing? Like, what mistakes are we making, and what can we learn by engaging with the East? Like getting out of our little tiny bubble. So we can be caught in our little tiny bubble of Anabaptist Christianity, and when we get out of that, we tend to still be within this really incredibly tiny bubble of American Christianity, and that's usually confined to American Reformed Christianity. So it's like a very tiny slice of Christianity that this is all we know. And so like we're just like continually going around in circles, making the same mistakes over and over and over again. It's like, well, maybe we need to look somewhere else.
Right. And, it's interesting, you mentioned the American bubble of Christianity. Even Orthodox churches in America will often be chastised and chuckled at by Orthodox churches from the East. The way they do different things in little ways and stuff like that. They'll kind of like, you guys, you're westernizing everything. And we look at that as Anabaptists or Protestants might look at it as like, what are you talking about? But it's like, that bubble of American Christianity is a real thing.
Right.
And it's one of those things that God is dealing with, I think.
Right. I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Anything else, John?
Yeah, I guess just the only other thing I want to say is just thanks to the viewers and the people who commented and everybody who gave us all the support on the first video that we did about the visit to church, because it would be easy to say it meant a lot to us, but really it meant a lot to us in the sense that that response, I think, for all three of us has helped to clarify the vision for what is it that we're trying to do with this podcast and with our lives as Christians. And I mentioned taking the channel a little more seriously and sort of than what I did before, but as soon as I said that, then I felt like I should have clarified that I started praying about what we're doing, and again, if there's a big audience right there, then suddenly like we need to do things right.
Yeah.
And so I was much more eager for God's guidance in the work that we do.
Right.
So when I say thank you, it meant a lot to us. That's what I mean.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
I guess I would also take the opportunity just to extend, especially thanks to, we already mentioned Father Anthony, but also the whole parish there at St. George, just for being welcoming and appreciative and everything, all the comments and encouragement and everything that was well appreciated as well.
Yes, and also we did visit St. Alexis in Battleground, and they were very hospitable as well, very kind, and we want to thank you guys. Father Francis, I believe. I think that's his name. He talked to us and was very kind to us as well. But to all of you who left comments and
Thanks for the invite, Zach.
yes, Zach, thank you. To all of you who left comments, there was so much encouragement. A lot of you said you would pray for us in these endeavors. We're so thankful for that, because it's not necessarily the most obvious thing that we're doing, really. I mean, we don't necessarily know exactly like what exactly do we do, and that's why we desire the intercessions of our fellow believers.
Yeah, but you did bring out a point there that we are doing something.
Yes.
And if you want to know what that is, I guess stay tuned.
Right. All right. Well, we thank you again for joining us today, and please leave your comments, ask your questions, offer your criticisms. Everybody is welcome to participate in the discussion. Honestly, the conversations that go on in the comment sections are very stimulating, very enjoyable.
And they help us know what do people want to hear?
Right. It's kind of like looking in a mirror for us,
Right.
you know, seeing what things actually look like to you, and you know how you're receiving what we're saying and how we look and everything like that. But anyway, thank you, and please continue your participation. Again, thank you for being with us today, and we wish you peace in Christ.